Hello, friends. Steve Stockton here with you. Welcome to Listener Stories, a chilling series where we delve into the depths of the unknown through spine-tingling tales submitted by you, our listeners, from eerie encounters with the supernatural to inexplicable phenomena that defy all logic. Join us as we navigate the shadows of the human experience and explore the darkest corners of the imagination. Each episode promises to leave you on the edge of your seat, questioning what lurks in the darkness and what secrets lie hidden in the night. So dim the lights, settle in, and prepare yourself for a journey into the realm of the unexplained. A pair of shadow people. So, I'll tell you about my experience and first encounter with a shadow person. I was 6 at the time, and this house that we lived in was attached, but always had the feel of something watching you. But when you turned around, nothing or nobody was there. To make it worse, I always feel or see myself being taken up onto the wall, top of the stairs before my bedroom door, and just dragged along it into some place. What I thought was just a dream was turning into a waking dream, and I didn't want to stay in the house on my own. And somehow, it always picked me. Like, why me? So anyway, one night my dad was at work, my mom was sitting watching my brothers sketch out their favorite sport or animals, and I was getting ready to go to bed. After sorting myself out in the bathroom, I peeked my head in the sitting room door and said goodnight to all, and they called back goodnight. As I walked up the stairs to bed, I got a few steps and felt something breathe against the back of my neck. I quickly turned around, thinking it was one of my brothers playing a prank on me. But no, nobody. I shrugged it off and continued up the stairs to bed. When I got up to the top of the stairs, I felt really sleepy, like I was going to pass out on the stair itself, but somehow I found the strength to keep going. The moment I got to the last step where my bedroom door is, I looked up and it was pitch black in there, more so than usual. I thought maybe my mother just got different curtains. But it was cold, and I shouted down to my mother, "Mom, are the windows closed up here?" My mother opened the sitting room door and said, "Yes, they are." I told her, "Okay, but it feels cold up here." She said, "It's okay, now go to bed, dear. I'll be up to check on you in a few minutes." So when I turned back to my bedroom door, there was a figure, black and defined, but clear as day to me. My brain couldn't imagine how someone got up the stairs past me, as our stairs were small to walk up, let alone get two people up side by side. I called out, "Hello, who are you? And can you leave, 'cause it's bedtime?" It felt like a few minutes passed, and I stepped forward to reach out for the bedroom light. But every time I got closer by the bedroom door frame to flick the bedroom light switch that was inside the room, this shadow person got closer. Finally, to the point that I could make out that he was about 6 feet tall, with a hat like cowboys wear, and a long coat like Neo in the film The Matrix wears. I thought it was odd, and I just remembered what my nanny told me. If you ever feel cold, or feel you have someone watching you but can't find them, or see a person that isn't there, just show them you're not afraid, but use your manners. So with that, I said, "Excuse me, sir, but this is not your room. Could you please leave so I can go to the bed, please?" And with that, it left. That night, I didn't sleep because I woke up not being able to move, only my eyes and breathing, but could not move my mouth. I tried to look around the room, but I couldn't move my head. I started to freak out, but then in the corner of my eye on the right side of me, where the walk-in storage area is, the wooden door slowly opened on its own. Then a hand appeared, quickly to grab the door from making a noise to alert the others in the house. It looked like shutters that move on the door, but it was just for air to pass from the bedroom into the walk-in storage room and back into the bedroom. Standing there was this shadow person, but this time it was a woman with long black hair, and she looked really frail looking. She quickly fell to the floor without making a sound and walked over to me, like Samara from the film The Ring. When she got to the end of the bed, she moved slowly around it, seeing that it was maybe too much for her. But no, she got up onto the bed and looked like she carefully placed each foot and hand onto the outside of my bed, slowly edging closer to me. Then she was sitting on top of my chest. Each moment my chest started to hurt and I couldn't take a long breath, only shorter ones. I felt dread and an overwhelming feeling of death. She placed her head just below my chin and whispered, "It's not your time, my child, but soon." She got off my chest and I could finally breathe again, which felt like it'd been hours from the pain I was in. And then I saw her walk in a weird way back to the walk-in storage area in my bedroom near the door. It slowly closed, and after a few minutes passed, the feeling of dread and the overwhelming feeling of death left the room. Finally breathing again, it got brighter in the room, like the evil left the room. As I looked around the room, I couldn't believe what just happened to me. Was it a dream? No. Was it real? Yes. Why did she say to me, "It's not your time, my child, but soon"? I wasn't her child, was I? No, surely not. My parents loved me. After overthinking, I ended up passing out. To my surprise, the next morning I woke up early to look over at the walk-in storage room to see the doors were still closed. But nobody was awake. I didn't move but pretended to be asleep. Then I heard noise from downstairs. Was it them? Back again to finally take me this time? No, it was my parents whispering downstairs. A sigh of relief washed over me, and I could finally take long, deep breaths while thinking to myself, I'm safe. I got up and got dressed, got my breakfast, and went off to school that morning, asking my friends about weird dreams they had. None of them had the same dream as me, and I just told them I felt like someone was going to take me, but didn't, and left. I was interrupted by our teacher, and we forgot what we were talking about and continued our school day. Later that night, and every other night, I go to bed when everyone else goes to bed, and it never happened again until late 2008, when I was back in my parents' house after my nanny's funeral. I had to change into my casual clothes, and nobody was in the house. And then it happened. I fell back on the sofa, couldn't move, and out of the corner of my eye, there she was, crouched down like an animal, ready to jump attack its prey. And I was helpless. I tried to move with all my might, telling my brain, body, and spirit, if I don't move, I'm dead. I slowly twitched from side to side, overcoming this paralyzing feeling of not being able to move. I quickly stood to my feet, turned to my left, and faced her, this being that was back to claim her prize. She backed away slowly, but I wasn't dropping my guard for nothing. I reached for my hurley and raised it mid-guard towards her, waiting for the strike she was about to pounce on me with. Then she opened her mouth and crackling sounds came out, and she closed her mouth again. After a while, she opened her mouth again, but she spoke to me. I told you, my child, I would be back for you. But I see you are a warrior and will not come easy for me. She started to whimper. She lowered her head and said, never will have you. Surprisingly, she dropped to the floor and vanished into the floor itself. I quickly jumped up onto the sofa with the hurley still in my hand, waiting to strike at her attack. But nothing happened. Was she gone? For good this time, I thought to myself. Then I said it out loud. Be gone from my life. You are not welcome in it. I don't give my consent or permission for you to be a part of my life. Be gone from my life. And with that, I felt a sense of peace and happiness fill me up and all around me. I quickly got down from the sofa, grabbed my stuff from the table, still holding the hurley in my hand, and left the sitting room, went out in the hall, checking the corners as I go to leave the house behind me. I opened the front door, turned around almost jumping out the door and onto the front step, facing into the house, and I slammed my front door with key and door and locked it. I turned around and ran down the steps and outside. That is my story of meeting shadow people. Signed, Michael from Ireland. Mysterious black blob creature. This is about a story that I was told a long while back that, although I like to think of myself as open-minded, I struggle to believe. I've changed names to protect identities. Back to around 1979 to 1980 in an area called Warden in the city of Worcester, UK. In our later teens, my sister and I were living at the home in which we grew up. I'd left home once and was back again. My return met with mine and my older sister's annoyance at having to again share a bedroom. My sister was dating Tom, later to be her husband. Late one night, I'd gone to bed, but disturbed by the bedroom light being switched on and my sister coming in. I lay squinting at the bright light and mumbled to her to turn it off and be quiet. Claire came over and crouched next to my bed and began telling me that something had happened that was so weird while she was out with Tom. She did seem agitated and, well, I was awake now, so let's hear it. This is what Claire told me. She and Tom were parked up way down a country lane that was local to where we lived. They had parked where the lane ran along a hedgerow with a canal along the other side. The canal in those days was little used except for fishing, so other than the nearby motorway bridge, it was really isolated. The motorway bridge cast a little light on the area, the only light. Claire said as they sat in the car, it suddenly jolted, as though something underneath had shoved it upwards. Tom looked out of his driver's side window down to the road and told Claire to lean over and look. They both saw a blacker than black, large, dark shape moving out into the road from under the car. At first, it was just like a dark blob. Then as it came out, it was on all fours, and Claire said it looked like it had a long tail and moved in a slinking, slow, snaking movement, making its way to a little ahead of the car and into the center of the road. Claire said it appeared heavy and muscular, although they couldn't see it clearly. It just gave that impression. In fact, after the event, Claire and Tom had agreed that it was far too big to have been able to fit under the car in the first place. Claire went on to say that to them it appeared like a large dog or a panther. Then, this creature stopped in the middle of the road and faced them, all in one fluid motion, stood upright on two legs, and as it was now near the motorway orange lights, they could see it was a man. This man was wearing what Claire described as a trilby hat, a long trench-style coat, and he had shoulder-length hair. Tom turned the car engine and lights on to see this man walk calmly toward the car with his hands, palms facing their direction, reaching out with a smile on his face. As Claire told me this, she said they felt as though this smile and gesture seemed like he was trying to put them at ease as he approached the car. Needless to say, Tom revved up and shot off. They didn't believe they hit him, but he got very, very close as they drove away. Fairly close by is the M5 motorway roundabout. There is almost always a police car or two sitting up there watching the traffic below. Tom drove to this roundabout hoping there would be a police car there. They didn't really know what they would tell the police, but felt it might get them to check it out if they let on they were concerned the car may have clipped a person. No police car in sight that night. In fact, the area was silent. The ways home were many from there, but all involved traveling the long dark lanes, which is all housing estates now. So I hear all this, and thinking that I meant to believe this large cat thing crawled out from under the car, stood up, and was a man, fully dressed at that, no way I would believe her. In 2004, I lived in Worcester still and worked for MenCap. I'd found a guy who was running a course on ghosts, dowsing, all sorts, but best of all, it was a chilled affair in a pub. I mentioned it to work colleagues who loved this sort of thing, and a few of us would go each week. This guy showed us some pretty weird things that would make any skeptic believe. Back at work one afternoon, and I'm chatting in the kitchen with Brenda, one of the colleagues that attended these evenings at the pub. We're chatting about how convincing the things demonstrated those nights were, making any stories this guy told us fairly easy to believe. This led to us comparing silly stories we've heard that are far too way out there. Needless to say, I brought up the story Claire told me all those years ago. After all, that was not one I would forget. As I'm telling Claire's story, another staff member came into the room to gather her bits and bobs to go home, having finished her shift. Julie, I will call her for this, stopped dead in her tracks and wide-eyed said, "How did you know about that?" Now, I have to point out that Julie had never come to any of those meetings with us, and I had not finished the story. I got to the part where this thing sidled into the road and began to stand, believing that Julie had heard enough to perhaps make her think it was about the black puma, the beast of Bodmin Moor, or whatever is meant to be wandering the British countryside being reported in the news. I told her it wasn't about that. Julie said, No, you mean the man in a hat. It was a man in a hat." Okay, so at this point, my jaw dropped. I was so shocked, I admit my eyes began to water up. No way could she have heard this story. She wasn't even born when this was supposed to have happened. Plus, it's not the sort of story you hear very often. Julie told us that 6 months earlier, her boyfriend and friends had parked up, in daylight, in a country lane in Hereford. They were smoking more than tobacco, but not stoned. The car they were in jolted really hard from beneath, and the driver saw a massive black animal, cat/dog, crawl out from beneath it. It was very black, so much so it was hard to make out detail very well, as there was no highlights in its coat. It wandered into the road a little way ahead of them and, all in one fluid motion, stood upright on 2 legs and was a man in a hat. They thought it looked like a small cowboy hat, and a long trench coat. His hair was shoulder length, and he raised his hands and walked toward their car. They sped off. This group of people made a pact not to tell anyone about what they saw, as they would not be believed, and anyway, the herb would be blamed for it. One of the group, however, needed to confide and naturally told his girlfriend, Julie. Julie swore never to tell about it, and she says she did believe him as he was so shocked by it. I finished my shift and went home, where I decided to call my sister, as it seemed I owed an apology. Claire told me she knew I never believed a word of it. We talked about the amount of time passed since she saw it and how, going by the description I just heard from Julie, this guy hadn't aged a bit. While talking with Claire on the phone, my daughter came downstairs from putting her stuff away, having just got back from her friend's house, being dropped off by her friend's mother. My daughter had a week previously been to the Malvern Hills Outdoor Center with her school. It's a kind of camp for team building and fitness. As my daughter came down the stairs, I mumbled to my sister on the phone that we have to change the conversation, as younger ears were about. My daughter heard me. She said, "Oh, don't worry about me. I'm not scared. I know you're talking about that stupid story of the animal that turns into a man." Claire heard this over the phone, and I was in shock. I asked her what she meant. She told me that at the camp, they were taken out on night walks in the woods and hills, and because it was dark, the instructor would try to creep them out by telling them that there was a big black bear or dog in the hills that would turn into a man. So that was enough for me. I keep a much more open mind now. Any feedback or similar cases would be great. Signed, subscriber, Little Me, aka Karen. A guardian, perhaps? Steve, I recently stumbled across your channels and thoroughly enjoyed listening to your narration. I follow David Paulides, Steve Isdahl, Scott Carpenter, and Lynn Smith's channels and always look forward to their latest videos and podcasts in all things Sasquatch. Coming across your channel, however, helps to fill the gap of things that seem to not be Sasquatch related, and for that I thank you. The incident I'm sharing with you occurred around 31 years ago, in the spring of 1989, to the best of my recollection, which would have made me 14 at the time. My younger brother, sister, and I were living with our then single mother in rural West Texas, and it was not at all uncommon to have severe thunderstorms move through that area. We had several close calls with tornadoes over the years, and we had become quite accustomed to such events. One late night between midnight and 1 a.m., however, we had a severe thunderstorm moving through the area that was just different, and I don't really know how to describe why. We were awakened by very loud thunder, near constant lightning strikes, and strong winds, and found that the power had been knocked out. While severe storms were a regular event, power outages were not, and it seemed to have my mother a little unnerved. The house we lived in was an A-frame, with a short kitchen/dining wing off the south side, and a longer bed and bath wing off the north side, with a loft-style bedroom upstairs, which is where my mother slept. The stairway came down into the north hall that led to the bedrooms that we kids occupied. I remember her coming downstairs to check on us. We were all awake by now, wandering around in the dark, and she seemed uneasy. At one point, she made a phone call to a close family friend that lived in an adjoining county, and that's when she found out that we were directly in the path of a cell that had reports of several tornadoes. The phone call was brief, and it did little to nothing to calm her nerves, so we all huddled together, said a prayer, and she told us all to go back to bed. We knew we wouldn't be going back to sleep anytime soon, so I, being the man of the house, decided to stay up for a while until the worst of the storm had passed. My brother and sister headed back to their beds, and I was talking to my mother as she headed back upstairs to her bed. When she reached the top of the stairs, I remember seeing her turn directly to her left, which is where the bed was located, and she said, "Good night, son." Even with the power out, there was so much lightning striking around us that we had fairly good visibility without the use of candles or flashlights, so I was able to see her clear the stairway and head straight to her bed via the light coming from a large window to the right of the stairway. Just as I was getting ready to turn toward my own bedroom, I saw at the top of the stairs and to the right, between the window and my mother's bed, a dark, shadowy personage that was as clear as day in the lightning flashes. The lightning was such a bright white, and that figure was jet black. It was unmistakable. I could see absolutely no features on this person, only a silhouette, and it was as tall as a normal adult and built like a woman wearing a farm-style dress. I froze and didn't know what to do as I saw it moving toward my mother, covering, as far as I could tell, 3-4 feet before the next series of lightning flashes, in which I found it was gone. Not a word from my mother, no indication that she even knew it was there with her. I stood frozen for what was probably another 2 or 3 minutes, listening for my mother to say something, but she never did. I never felt fear, simply confusion as to what I was looking at, why it was there, and why it was heading to my mother's bed. The storm passed without further incident, and power was restored by the time we awoke the next morning. It was a weekend, so we were all at home together, and I asked my mother if she saw that shadow figure in her room just as she was laying down in bed. She had no idea what I was even talking about, so I briefly described to her what I'd seen. Her response was a simple shrug, and she said, "Maybe it was my guardian angel?" Yeah, maybe that's what it was. I have no idea. I've never experienced anything else like that since, but my younger brother had a similar yet terrifying event several years before that. He still to this day swears happened just as he described it to us when he was only 4 or 5 years old. Perhaps I can get him to write that one down and share it with you at a future date. Anyway, that's my strange encounter, and you're the first person outside of my family that I've shared this with. Feel free to use my name as listed below. Thanks. Signed, Jason K. German Paranormal Encounter. Hi Steve, I love your work, and I'm filled with delight every time YouTube notifies me that you've uploaded a new video. I have numerous stories regarding the paranormal from my 26 years on this earth, but I'd like to tell you one that kick-started my whole belief in the paranormal world. I'm from the county of Staffordshire, England, and in 2008, while at secondary school, we went on a language trip to Germany. This was a week-long trip that consisted of a coach journey down to Dover, then taking the ferry to Calais, France, and making our way across to Germany. We left late at night and arrived early the next morning after traveling through the night, but as excited 14-year-olds, we were all looking forward to the trip ahead. We stayed in a quiet German village in the Rhineland and were put into a room with 4 of us, including myself. The hotel was what you would expect for a school trip, but it had beds and a roof over our heads, so we were happy. Strange things began on the first night when the phone of one of the guys in our room would keep spontaneously playing the song "Every Breath You Take" by the Police. This continued throughout our stay. When we first entered the room, I noticed that there was a painting as soon as we walked in of a clown. This was an eerie painting and an odd choice for the room. As I'd watched the original It movie on the coach down to Germany, I was pretty freaked out by this, but put it down to coincidence. My bed was facing the picture, and throughout the week I would see orbs moving past the photograph, but again I chalked it down to coincidence as I didn't believe in the paranormal at that time. It came down to the last day, and we were packed and ready to leave the hotel. Me and 2 others were messing around, taking pictures of the room on our phones, when I turned around and hovered my camera over the painting. The painting began to start swaying from side to side, slowly. I stayed in amazement for a few seconds and told the other 2 what was happening. They accused me of having moved the picture, but stood and watched as it began to gain momentum. One of the guys moved his finger toward the painting to stop it, and it slammed off the wall. We ran out of the room screaming and were, unsurprisingly, not believed when we told our story to the others. The funny thing is, the village, as I said before, was situated in the Rhineland, which saw a lot of activity in the 1930s and onward during the rise of Hitler. There had been a synagogue in the village that had been burned down during this time. Looking back, knowing what I know now, there was a tremendous amount of suffering that had taken place in that village, and whatever was still there had taken an interest in me and my friends. I've tried to look up the history of this hotel over the years, but had no luck. I found out a year later, when the year group below me went on the same trip, that the part of the hotel that we had stayed in had burned down due to a fire. But I have no more information on that, unfortunately. I want to thank you for reading this story, and I hope it wasn't too long. I just hope that whatever was in that room with us is now at peace. Thank you. Signed, Alex. Strange encounter in Indiana. Hello. I follow your channel on YouTube and thought I would share something very strange that happened to me when I was in high school. I grew up in rural Indiana, and the roads I drove back and forth to high school were all back country roads. There's a crossroads on the way where a church and a graveyard sit. The church has always looked old and ran down, and honestly I've never seen more than 1 car there, and that was rare. I almost never went by it on Sundays, so I suppose that's not strange. This crossroads fits the stereotypical sell your soul at the crossroads vibe. It's in the middle of nowhere, next to a church and a graveyard. I was heavily involved in music and band, so it was not rare for me to be coming home from a practice at dusk. One night, I was driving home and the sun was setting. When I got close to the church, I could see 4 cars parked in the driveway and the grass next to it. I glanced over because I rarely see cars there. I could see that every car was full, meaning every seat had someone in it. All the people were looking directly forward, away from the road, and no one seemed to be moving. The sun was at the right angle, so I could easily see their silhouettes. I slowed down to turn because my turn was practically across the street from the church. No one ever moved or appeared to be talking. It was very bizarre. Had one person turned around talking, or had I seen any movement, I would have blown it off and not thought twice, assuming that it's to be a church function. I went real slow up the road, watching the cars in my rearview mirror, and there was no detectable movement in the cars. It was almost as if someone had put mannequins in the cars, but I drove close enough to see that that wasn't the case. Or if it was, they were highly detailed. I drove on and stopped at my buddy's house, which was a couple of miles from the spot. I told him the story about what I saw, but he didn't seem that interested or thought I was BSing him. I stayed there for about an hour, and it was dark now. As I was leaving, he asked if I wanted to drive back and see if they were still there. I, of course, said yes. He got in my car and we headed back to the church. When we rolled up, the cars were still there, but no one was in them. It did appear there were people in the church, but all the church lights were off, but a few candles could be seen. We decided they were doing some church thing, and I headed back to drop my buddy off and head home. The next day I drove to school, and when I came to the crossroads, there was a huge burnt spot in the middle of the crossroads, and one of the fields had caught fire. The fire must have been put out in the night or early morning, but you could clearly see where it burned. I was probably 17 then, and I still think about that at 40. Had it not been because of the people in the cars, some of which appeared to be adults, I would have blown off the whole thing as kids messing around. It appeared to be cult-like activity, and still to this day, I wish I would have stayed and spied on them. I included a couple Google Earth pics of the Crossroads and the church. Feel free to use my story, just notify me if you do so I can check it out. Love, Nikki. Well, friends, let us know what you think about these stories in the comments below, but please be respectful of the opinions of others. And if you have any strange stories you would like to see featured in an upcoming video, email them to nationalparkmysteriesyt@gmail.com. We're very interested in stories that detail encounters with ghosts, humanoids, cryptids, or any type of other unknown entity that is beyond explanation. Thanks again for listening, and please be sure to give us a like on the video and to share and subscribe for more strange stories. Meanwhile, be good to yourselves and each other. I'm Steve Stockton, and I'll talk to you next time.